WWE has often been called a machine for building legends, from The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin to Randy Orton, The Undertaker, and many others. But something that gets talked about far less is how this same company has time and again destroyed wrestlers who were fully ready to become main event faces of the company and true symbols of pro wrestling. These were performers the fans loved. They had worked hard on themselves, had the talent, the charisma, and every tool needed to succeed. Yet WWE chose to shut them down, one by one. Why? That's exactly what we're going to dig into today. Let's take a look at the wrestlers whose careers the company didn't just derail, but who were also left with serious emotional and psychological scars. And trust me, each of these stories might genuinely shock you. Before we begin, don't forget to support the channel by leaving a like, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start with Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder, also known as Matt Cardona, was a wrestler who fought for his own success with his bare hands. Back in 2011, when most wrestlers were still just waiting for WWE to hand them an opportunity, Zack Ryder started his own YouTube channel and began making comedy content related to wrestling, all in his own style, without any help or backing from WWE. And the result? Fans loved it. His popularity exploded, and he built his own dedicated fan base. Before long, chants and cheers for Zack Ryder were echoing through arenas during shows. He had forced his way up from the very bottom into WWE's spotlight. This time, it wasn't the company pushing him. It was his own popularity that had grown so large that WWE was forced to give him a chance. He went on to win the United States Championship, and in December 2011, when he won the title, the arena erupted. Fans went wild. It was truly one of those special, unforgettable moments. But just 1 month later, in his very first title defense, WWE stripped the belt from him with almost no effort, having him lose to Jack Swagger. There was no real storyline behind it, no respect shown for his character or for the fans who supported him. And that's when Zack Ryder's real burial began. After losing the title, the company put him through a humiliating storyline. He was written into a romantic angle with Eve Torres, and then, continuing that same storyline, John Cena took Eve away from him. It was a story that did absolutely nothing to help Zack Ryder. It only made him look weaker and more insignificant. On top of that, he kept losing matches on live events and TV without any clear reason. Within a few months, a character who was supposed to be a future star had turned into an ordinary jobber. Years later, Zack Ryder himself said in interviews that he felt he was being punished for achieving success outside of the traditional company-controlled system. The message the company seemed to be sending was crystal clear. We decide who succeeds and who doesn't. Zack Ryder stayed with WWE until 2020, but he spent a large chunk of that time in the tag team division and on mid-card pre-show matches that hardly anyone was watching. Bray Wyatt was a genius who was never truly understood. It's fair to say Bray Wyatt was one of the most creative wrestlers in the history of modern pro wrestling. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a true artist. The character he built with the Wyatt family in 2013-2014 was unlike anything we had seen before. He was a chilling cult leader who spoke in a cryptic, almost poetic way, with an uncanny ability to make even the strangest storylines feel believable and compelling to the audience. When it came to character work, Bray Wyatt was genuinely a genius. The problem was that WWE would repeatedly let him create incredible ideas, only to tear them down for no clear reason. One of the earliest examples happened at WrestleMania 30, where Bray lost to John Cena, a loss many felt had no real justification. He was still early in his run and had just turned his character into one of the most compelling parts of the show. History repeated itself years later when Bray Wyatt also lost to Randy Orton at WrestleMania, another defeat that dealt a major blow to his character.
But perhaps Bray Wyatt's greatest masterpiece was The Fiend, a character introduced in 2019 that quickly became one of the company's most successful and beloved. Yet again, WWE failed to protect that success. First, the storyline took a hit with a bizarre and controversial finish to his Hell in a Cell match against Seth Rollins, an ending that drew heavy criticism from fans and analysts alike. The Fiend was supposed to be an unstoppable monster, a character no one could easily defeat. But at WWE Super Showdown 2020, the company made a decision that's still considered one of the most controversial booking choices in the promotion's modern history. The Fiend lost to Goldberg in under 5 minutes, who was over 50 years old at the time, in under 5 minutes. Fans were stunned, and many analysts called it one of the worst booking decisions of recent years. In 2021, Wyatt left WWE while he still had so much left to offer, and many believed his best years were still ahead of him. He made a triumphant return to the company in 2022 to an incredible reception from fans. Unfortunately, that return didn't last long. In 2023, Bray Wyatt passed away suddenly and shockingly at just 36 years old, sending shockwaves through the wrestling world. Wyatt had said in various interviews and podcasts that his ideas were often rejected or changed at the last minute, something he found deeply frustrating. He believed the creativity that made his character unique always ran into heavy restrictions, and that he was never able to bring everything he envisioned to life.
Toni Storm is a star whose true value WWE never understood. Toni Storm is one of the greatest talents of the new generation of women's wrestling. Before joining WWE, she was already considered one of the most promising rising stars in the wrestling world. She had made her name in Europe, Japan, and the independent scene. And when she signed with WWE, many were confident she'd become one of the top faces of the women's division. At first, everything looked great. She shined in the Mae Young Classic tournament and won it, then became NXT UK Women's Champion and one of that brand's most important stars. But once she moved up to the main NXT roster, problems began. Contrary to expectations, WWE never had a clear long-term plan for her. Weeks and months would go by where Toni Storm was either completely absent from TV or placed in storylines that did little for her standing. And whenever she did get an opportunity, she'd come out of it as the loser.
Toni herself later said that one of the hardest parts of being in WWE was that she often had no idea what her plan even was. She felt like she was just sitting around waiting for a chance to show what she could really do. And once she reached the main roster, things got even worse. After debuting and spending some time on SmackDown around late 2021, if I remember correctly, she finally entered a feud with Charlotte Flair, and it looked like maybe WWE was finally going to invest in her. But it turned out to be just a disastrous storyline that made her situation worse. As if that wasn't enough, she was later thrown into the 24/7 championship chase on a live event. Then something happened that almost nobody saw coming. In, I believe, December 2021, Toni Storm personally requested her release from WWE, and thankfully, the company granted it. Reports later surfaced indicating she had suffered severe burnout and was deeply unhappy with her working conditions and career path. Toni herself later admitted that for a while she had considered retiring from wrestling altogether. Just when many thought her career might be over, everything changed. In 2022, Toni Storm signed with AEW and gradually became one of the most important stars in their women's division. But the real turning point came when the timeless Toni Storm character was created, a completely different persona inspired by classic Hollywood stars, which quickly became one of the most beloved, creative, and best characters in the entire wrestling industry. The same wrestler who didn't even have a clear plan in WWE had now become one of the top faces of all elite wrestling. She's won the AEW Women's World Championship multiple times, and many critics consider her AEW run the best of her career. A talent WWE never managed to fully use, but who, once she found the right environment, became one of the biggest stars in women's wrestling worldwide.
Dean Ambrose, known today as Jon Moxley, was a member of the legendary faction The Shield. Without a doubt, one of the most successful factions in modern WWE history. Ambrose had it all: charisma, in-ring ability, a unique character, and most importantly, popularity with the fans. When The Shield broke up, many believed Dean Ambrose was destined to become one of the company's biggest stars. He even won the WWE Championship in 2016 and spent time at the top of the card. But problems started early. Ambrose later revealed in his famous interview with Chris Jericho after leaving WWE that he was deeply unhappy with the state of the creative team and writing department. According to him, he was repeatedly handed scripts that he felt were dumb, weak, and made no sense. In some storylines, he was forced to do things that didn't fit his character at all. Ideas he pitched himself were constantly shot down, and he increasingly felt the company had no interest in turning him into a true star, as if WWE only wanted him to be a WWE superstar, someone who would carry out whatever he was told without question. The turning point that led him to finally decide to leave the company came during a storyline with Nia Jax, one of the strangest programs of that era. Ambrose later mentioned that many of the decisions made for his character during that time were bizarre and left him unsatisfied. He felt he no longer had any control over his character or his career path, and that every day he was drifting further from the kind of performer he wanted to be. When he left the company in 2019, everyone was waiting to see what his next move would be, and the answer came quickly. He showed up in AEW under his real name, Jon Moxley, and almost from that moment, everything changed. Moxley returned to the raw, brutal, authentic style he'd always loved, the same character he'd built for himself years earlier on the independent scene, and now he could bring it to life without restrictions. The results were phenomenal. He's won the AEW World Championship multiple times, competed in some of the promotion's biggest matches, and many of his bouts have become instant classics. His success wasn't limited to AEW either. Moxley has also had standout performances in Japan and in New Japan Pro Wrestling, proving he could be one of the top names in the industry anywhere in the world. What helped him most of all was creative freedom. He no longer had to play a character written by someone else. He could simply be who he really was. That's why, for so many fans, the difference between Dean Ambrose in WWE and Jon Moxley in AEW is night and day. Jon Moxley has gone on to become one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling, and even today, many fans consider him among the very best wrestlers in the world. And maybe all of this just proves one thing. The problem was never Dean Ambrose. The problem was how WWE handled him and the path they chose for him.
Cesaro, the Swiss Superman, WWE never used correctly. Cesaro, known today in AEW as Claudio Castagnoli, was one of the best and most technically gifted wrestlers WWE ever had. This man was truly extraordinary in terms of raw strength. His power moves were sometimes almost unbelievable, and on top of that, his European technical wrestling style was at the highest possible level. It wasn't just the fans. Other wrestlers themselves repeatedly praised his in-ring ability. Yet, despite all these qualities, WWE could never find the right place for him. The biggest recurring issue with Cesaro was that the company never built him a clear, strong character. He kept getting shuffled from one tag team to another, working under different managers like Paul Heyman and Zeb Coulter, but he never had a consistent identity, and his career path kept changing direction. And every single time fans started rallying behind him and calling for his big push, WWE would pull back. Vince McMahon himself reportedly said Cesaro didn't connect enough with the audience. But a lot of fans believed the exact opposite was true. Every time Cesaro started gaining real traction and audience attention, some unexpected loss would come along and knock him back down, as if something was always standing in the way right when he was about to break through to the next level.
In 2021, Cesaro finally got a shot at the Universal Championship against Roman Reigns. Fans were thrilled about the match, and many hoped he would mark the start of his true rise. But after losing to Reigns, he essentially disappeared from television and stopped playing any significant role in storylines. Eventually, when his WWE contract expired, he chose not to renew it and signed with AEW instead, returning to competition under his real name, Claudio Castagnoli, joining the Blackpool Combat Club alongside names like Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. Interestingly, his run in AEW proved exactly what so many fans had been saying for years. Claudio showed he absolutely had what it takes to be a main event level performer. He's had big, high-quality matches, been given real opportunities to shine, and finally gotten to show the abilities that had spent years buried under WWE's decisions.
If you look closely at all the names we've talked about today, there's a common pattern running through nearly all of them. It always starts out great. The company pushes them, puts them in important matches, the fans embrace them, and it looks like they're on the road to becoming a huge star. Then suddenly, without any clear reason, the push stops. The wrestler starts losing matches, disappears from television, or gets thrown into storylines that neither help their character nor interest the fans. And then comes the final stage, the stage where the wrestler becomes a jobber, someone who loses matches just to elevate others, or sits on the bench until their contract runs out, or eventually asks for their release. So the real question is, why does this happen? There are several reasons, but one of the biggest, without a doubt, was Vince McMahon. Up until 2022, he held primary control over WWE's creative direction, and he had a very fixed idea of what a big star needed to have. And in many cases, he simply wasn't willing to change his mind, even when the fans were clearly behind someone else. Now, I'm not saying Triple H is some enlightened, much better alternative, but Vince really was worse. Another factor is backstage politics. In every company, there are people who influence decision-making, and WWE is no exception. Who gets an opportunity and who doesn't isn't always just about in-ring performance. Another issue is a disregard for what the fans actually want. Time and again, instead of listening to what the audience wanted, WWE tried to force its own preferred stars onto the crowd. And finally, there's one more factor. Wrestlers like Zack Ryder, Karrion Kross, or LA Knight have proven they can become popular without WWE's help at all. But some fans believe the company has always wanted full control over how its stars rise, and it's never been comfortable with cases where that control slips away. So, does WWE really bury its own stars? Looking at all the examples we've gone through, the answer for a lot of fans is probably yes. Zack Ryder, Bray Wyatt, Cesaro, Dean Ambrose, Toni Storm, these are just a handful of examples. You could easily add names like Cody Rhodes before his WWE return, Johnny Gargano, Bayley, and plenty of others to this list. All of these cases have led a lot of fans to believe that WWE sometimes genuinely struggles when it comes to managing talent that people truly love. To be fair though, it's worth noting, not everything can be blamed on the company. Some wrestlers simply can't adapt to WWE's environment. Some don't make the most of the opportunities they're given. And sometimes audience tastes just shift quickly. That part of the story is real, but it's not the whole truth. Because when you look at people like Cesaro, Jon Moxley, or Toni Storm, you see that after leaving WWE, they went on to achieve huge success elsewhere. And that, at the very least, raises the question, was the problem really the wrestlers themselves, or was it the environment they were placed in? Now it's your turn. What do you think is the real reason behind all this?
Does WWE genuinely destroy some of its own talent through bad decisions? Or do the wrestlers themselves fail to make the most of their opportunities? Or maybe the problem is with the fans, whose opinions change too quickly. Let us know in the comments and tell us which wrestler's burial hurt you the most as a fan. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next wrestling stories. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video. Take care.